What is up, you guys? First things first, I'm sorry if the background noise in this video is ridiculous. There are birds in these trees, and there's an air conditioner just there in my kitchen window. So, if you can't already tell, there is the trellis up behind me that was not there the last time I shot a video. We literally just got that done. I mean, just as in less than 10 minutes ago. And I'm now about to trellis my tomatoes up onto it. So I've gotten a lot of work done in the garden over the past couple days, and I didn't film much, and I felt bad. This channel is really helping me hold myself accountable and try to actually get things done continuously weekly and be productive about it and feel good about it. So that's doing awesome so far. But I'm going to film a garden tour either tonight after I'm done with this or tomorrow morning before I go to work. So I just thought I'd turn on the camera, say hey, and let you guys follow me along while I trellis my tomatoes. I will probably just do a time lapse of me doing most of them, and then actually get close and personal and show you guys how I'm doing it with the last tomato. So let's go. So just for reference, those boards up there, this one going long ways and this one going long ways behind me are 1x4s, and I'm going to be using this just hemp natural twine that I got from the craft section at Walmart to tie the tomatoes up. And then I'm going to use some pieces of fence wire that I had cut off from a fence last year as basically landscape staples, because I don't have any of those, so we're going to do what we can. I don't know if you can hear me from way over there, but I'm going to prune these tomatoes as I trellis them up. This is what I meant by using pieces of fencing as a landscape staple. So last year, the trellises that those peas are on, I cut some of the lateral bars off so that I could stick the vertical pieces down into the soil. So these are those lateral pieces, and I'm just going to bend them in the middle, tie the bottom of the string to that, and then stick this into my soil. See if it works. This is what happens when you don't prune your suckers off for 2 weeks. That's a whole new plant, sir. Here's another one. Also, I know it's getting dark. I hope this still looks okay. We'll try. We're trying. Okay, guys. It is now very dark outside, especially for you on the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up all of these tomatoes except for one branch on one, and then I will save that one for tomorrow morning or tomorrow evening and take a video to show you guys exactly what I did, because it's just too dark out here. Hey guys, what's up? It is several days later from the first half of this video, which is weird because it's going to be the first video I've shot that is over multiple days, but as you may have seen, it got very, very dark the last time I was outside. So I am here to now tell you about my trellis and my tomatoes and why I chose to trellis them this way, and then I'll show you how exactly I trellis them on these strings. So first of all, this trellis is that's two there, they're in line, one there and one's off camera just to the front over here. But there are 4 T-posts. 2 of them are 10 feet tall. No. 2 of them are 10 feet tall and 2 of them are 8 feet tall. And we cemented them into the ground probably about 10 inches and let them dry over multiple days before doing anything else to them. After they were dry, we bought these, they are 1x4s, and this one that I'm pointing to here is 10 feet long, and the one on the opposite side, this one that's closer to me that you can't actually see, that one is 10 feet long. And then the ones connecting them on the edges are slanted because that side is shorter than this closer side. It wasn't very difficult to put those up. We basically held some pieces of board up to the T-posts and drilled holes in the boards where it matched up with the T-post holes. And then we drilled holes in the actual trellis board and held those against the T-post and then bolted them together. So each one has probably 4 inches worth of just scrap wood in between the T-post and these boards. Yeah, so basically we just put those together with 1x4s, some scrap 2x2s, some scrap 1x4 pieces. We used 4 lag bolts, 4 washers, 4 nuts, and like 8 screws just to hold it all together and make sure it's nice and sturdy. Why use this kind of a trellis? This is called a string trellis, otherwise known as an umbrella trellis. I chose to do this type of trellis because all of the tomato varieties that I grow are indeterminate tomatoes. So there are indeterminate and determinate tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes grow to a determined size and then set all their fruit at once, and then they're done for the season. Whereas indeterminate tomatoes will continue to grow all season long as they still have enough nutrients coming from the soil and don't get diseased or too much pest damage. So my goal is to only grow this one set of plants, and hopefully they will provide fruit for me all season. Maybe towards August I might try to get some new ones in that will last me until November or December, because that's when we get our first really harsh freeze around here where I live. Indeterminate tomatoes don't really go well with tomato cages. Tomato cages are more for bush style or determinate varieties of tomatoes, because those are the ones that you don't want to prune, leave all the fruit on, leave all the suckers on, and let them just bush out. That way you'll get the most fruit. Whereas mine will get over 10 feet tall, and a tomato cage is 3 feet tall. It doesn't work for indeterminate varieties of tomatoes, really. I started these tomatoes terribly early, and then had to continue to put them off, planting them out because I didn't have enough soil, or the weather has still been really up and down. So these have only been in the ground for about 2 weeks. I started them in February, in the end of February, maybe around the 20th, 22nd, 23rd, somewhere in there of February, and had them in started them in 2.5 inch pots until they basically outgrew those pots. Then I up-potted them into half-gallon and gallon-sized containers and kept them inside, and then slowly hardened them off and transferred them into the greenhouse until I was able to get some more soil and plant them out. Usually, you would plant out your tomatoes and you don't have to have the trellis ready, but my tomatoes were started so early that they would have flopped over and potentially broken if I planted them out before my trellis was ready. So they waited in those gallon pots for quite a while, and I still have a few of them that are in gallon-sized pots. I don't know if I'm gonna plant those or not because I have quite a few tomatoes, and I'm the only person in my house who really likes tomatoes. He likes tomatoes, he's very specific about his tomatoes. I'm growing multiple varieties of tomatoes, and I have them written down right here, and I'll just let you know what they are because some people care. So I'm growing Thorburns terracotta tomatoes, Dr. Wyche yellow tomatoes, Castelluto Genovese tomatoes, Brad's atomic grape tomatoes, Sunrise bumblebee cherry tomatoes, a variety that's just called large red cherry tomatoes, and then German Johnson tomatoes, big boy slicer tomatoes, better boy slicer tomatoes, and Marglobe tomatoes. I started most of those from seed. Some of them are pre-started plants, well, somebody else started them, that I bought or that my mom bought for me. My mom really loves tomatoes. So last year I used a Florida weave / basket trellis. So if I was to do that on these, instead of having upright strings, I would do lateral strings that way and make kind of a basket to contain your tomatoes in between the two strings. That's what I did last year. The Florida weave is kind of the same thing, but instead of a basket to contain, you kind of weave in between your tomato plants to kind of keep them steady. Sturdy, not steady, same thing. And I just, for one, mine wasn't tall enough last year, so that it wasn't as helpful as I wanted it to be. For two, my T-posts were not cemented into the ground, so the pressure from side to side pushing on them made my T-posts like turn inward like this, and then it got less strong over time and wouldn't really hold my tomatoes up. The next reason is they were very hard to prune with that many strings. You would have to put another string upward every 6 inches or so once the plants got heavy enough with all the fruit on them and everything, just so you had enough resistance to keep them up and together. And it just wasn't very easy to get in between the strings, prune the tomatoes, and make sure that I don't cut the strings off on accident. And due to the pruning being harder, I then had a worse time with pests and fungal diseases because I couldn't physically see the pests to remove them. I tried to garden as organically as possible, so I didn't use pesticides or diatomaceous earth or anything. I try to just hand remove them and interplant as best as I can to try and make them not want to be here in the first place. So the fungal diseases, the less you prune, the more leaves you have, and the more leaves you have, the more they are condensed together, and the less airflow you have in between your plants. So powdery mildew is a really big problem here, and I did start to get a little bit of that on my tomatoes towards the end of the season, so I just wanted to avoid that as much as possible. So this way, each liter of the tomato, which I prune my tomatoes typically to 2 liters. A few of them I let have 3. A couple of them just have 1 liter. It really depends on how healthy the plant is, when I plant it out, how big the liters are, where they're connected. Typically I'd say I would prune mine to 2 liters so that I can still have enough airflow and a lot of fruit production. This trellis also allows, once the tomatoes grow all the way up to the top, they can grow over and then start growing back down. So even though this one closer to me is probably about 8 feet tall at its tallest, the tomatoes can grow longer than that and grow over the edge and back down the trellis so that they could get hopefully as long as possible to produce as much fruit for me as possible. Yeah, so mostly because they can get taller, it's easier to prune, it's more support per liter of tomato because each liter has its own string going up to the top. And then the pest and disease issues, obviously, because I can just prune them better and they have more airflow. This is also a lot simpler to remove. Last year I used elastic, like elastic that you would, if you were like gonna make like a beanie or something, the really thin elastic that you would put around the head. That's what I used to tie up my tomatoes. So not only were my T-posts moving inward, but my elastic string was getting weaker and weaker as the season went on and as it sat in the sun. This string is 100% natural hemp twine, and at the end of the season I'll just be able to cut it off and compost it with my tomatoes instead of trying to actually unravel them to put the tomatoes in the compost and get rid of the string. A lot of people use cattle panels connected to T-posts to trellis their tomatoes, and I don't have a problem with that per se, but I have a really small garden, so if I were to put up a cattle panel, I then would have to maneuver around it, like physically, as well as I would have to take it down and put it back up depending on what plants I have planted where. Whereas with this, I could plant whatever I wanted with the tomatoes and I wouldn't have to worry about the trellis space being taken up because my trellis is just a string to wherever I choose to put it. Also this way, if I chose to prune my tomatoes to 2 liters and then later in the season I forget to prune off a sucker and it becomes a very productive part of the plant, rather than pruning it off, I could then just add another string and trellis that whole new liter, and then I just have a whole new liter from my tomato plant. And I might need to feed my soil more to get food into my plant, but that's just a decision I can make rather than having to make those decisions at the very beginning. This is just more of a flexible option. I'm also going to be trellising my cucumbers in the same way, and my winter squashes, like my butternut squash, and if I have any vining varieties of zucchini, which I'm not sure if the variety that I have is vining or not, then I'll probably also use this way. I do have some small wire fencing. It's probably 4 inches by 2 inches, like squares of wire 4 inch by 2 inch in a roll. And that I may put up in between these two pieces, so on like the edge side for peas and green beans, runner beans. So I guess that's all I really had to tell you about the tomatoes and the trellis, why I chose the trellis, and what options there are, I guess. I think I gave you all the information you could need for that. If not, go ahead and ask me questions in the comments down below and I'll be happy to answer them for you guys. So, other than that, I have a few tomatoes left that I still need to trellis, like put strings from the trellis down to the tomato, and I wanted to show you guys exactly how I do it, so let's go. Alright, I hope you can hear me. And also I tried to make it so you can see this upper board up here that I'm going to be tying it to, and the tomato probably down to here about where it comes out of the bucket. So right now I need more of this twine. I only have one long piece of this twine, which is only enough to do 1 liter of my tomato, so one is going to be without a string, but this one is small enough that it's still holding itself up fairly well, so I'm not terribly worried about it. This is a piece of wire from that fencing that I was talking to you guys about. I don't have any landscape staples, so I just bend this into a staple-like shape, just like that, and then I tie this twine to the curved part. And this is going to be the piece that is at the base of your tomato. There are multiple ways you could do this. I've found that for my tomatoes that are already pretty tall, it's been easier for me to connect or tie the twine up here on the top and then wrap it around the tomato from the top and then stick this into the soil at the end. But if your tomatoes are shorter, it might be easier for you to stick this in the soil, wrap it up your tomato, and then tie it to the top last. It's really up to whatever you guys want to do. I think I did both, like for each one of those I was just testing which one was easier, and I ended up doing it in a bunch of different ways. So however's easiest really for you, doesn't matter. The one thing I would say is if you tie it first and get all the way down, then you might run out of string, or you might have too much string, have to untie it, cut some off, and retie it. But I tie them loose at the beginning and then tug on them at the end so that if I need to retie it, I can. So we're going to start from the very top. So on the other ones, to measure, I kind of just went to the ground instead of to the bucket, and then up to here, so that I knew I had enough twine to wrap around the tomato and still have something to put in the ground. So I'm going to give it a little extra, and that's where I'm going to tie. I'm actually going to tie, I'm not going to put a bucket right here because this is walking space, so I'm going to tie one of these liters as far this way as I can. Like I said, I might need to tie it, so I'm just going to leave a loop right now. And just based on anatomically how this tomato is already sitting, I'd say this liter needs to be strung to this side. So I'm just going to bring it down to where the tomato is and start wrapping it around. One thing I would say is try to avoid putting the string directly against any of the flower stems, because that's where the fruit is going to be and you don't want to hurt that part of it. I would put it underneath the main leaves and then just wrap it around only the stem as much as possible. got it halfway down, and I'm going to bring you guys in a little closer to show you the rest. Hopefully that's close enough for you guys, but this is where we are right here. So this is what I meant. This is a flower stem, like a fruiting stem. This is where all the flowers are, and these are where the tomatoes will grow. So I'm going to wrap it underneath that quite a bit so that it doesn't rub up against it and harm that one in any way. And just try to make it a looser, longer loop for that one. And then just keep going around. So here I'm gonna go underneath this leaf, and then underneath this one, and then under this one, under that one, so you guys kind of get it. And then once you're at the very bottom, try to focus on the actual tomato here. I'm gonna wrap it a little more tightly down here, but not terribly so, because the tomato stem is still gonna get thicker throughout the season. It's still gonna grow. And then from, I don't know if that's in the way. Here, once you get to the second liter, like I said, I prune most of my tomatoes to 2 liters, so this is one, that's the other. I'm just gonna start going around the base now. Like that. And I do think I am going to have to retie this one, but that's fine. So just keep going around the base as many times until your string runs out. I am going to retie it just to tighten the tomato up to the trellis, but I don't need to pull any of the string from down here. So now, right here, I'm just moving some of the mulch to the side, digging a small hole, and then I'm going to stick this wire, this homemade landscape staple, into the soil under the tomato at a little bit of an angle to try and anchor it in, and cover it back with the soil, cover it back with the mulch. Easy enough. So now it is wrapped all the way up this tomato, like so. And I'll move you guys back up so that you can see. I'm just going to untie this knot that I put in it. Make sure it's still wrapped around nicely at the top. And then kind of pull it tight so that the tomato is actually using this as stability. I'll hold this up the top and retie it. And this time I don't have to do a loop because this is how it's going to stay. There's a lot extra on this one, but it's not enough to do another tomato, so I'll just cut that off. Alright guys, I think that's all I really had to show you today. I hope that I gave you all the information you could possibly need about my trellis and how I'm deciding to trellis my tomatoes and my cucumbers. I do have some cucumbers planted that probably need to be trellised anytime, but like I said, I need to buy more string. So I'm sure I'll bring you guys along for those garden chores when the time comes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate you subscribing, liking, and watching the videos. Let me know if there's anything specific you want to see, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.